Welcome to the Short Funk Podcast. I'm Tom Barbalet. Today, meeting the city. After the recent set of shootings, the double homicide, various other shootings that have occurred, I've pushed really hard in order to get a meeting with the city. Ideally with the mayor, but as it turns out, I met the head of the Gang Prevention Task Force and one of the mayor's assistants Friday in San Jose City Hall on the 18th floor. A beautiful view out over San Jose. But when I went into the meeting, I came to realize that the people who are in charge of things like gang prevention and these kind of ideas, they're like school guidance counselors. And they appear genuinely powerless in order to combat the gang-related problems in this area. And I'll explain fundamentally why. The Gang Prevention Task Force is misnamed. Really, it's about teaching kids to stay in school, getting jobs after school, not getting into gangs, and this is what the Gang Prevention Task Force does. For the dozen or so houses in our community that are well-known gang houses, where this information has been passed to the police department, where everyone in the community knows the gang houses, see the previous discussion associated with Snappy the alligator, these houses are maintained. Because actually, the city, the Gang Prevention Task Force, the police department, they don't have the resources to accurately tackle this particular problem. See again the possibility that the federal government may be actually the ideal organisation, or at least group of organisations, to deal with this problem head on. But as residents, our best resort is to cook cupcakes, take over baked goods, try to integrate the gang houses in our community into the community. And somewhat surreally, the Gang Prevention Task Force, the police, the mayor's office, our local council representative, all meeting tomorrow evening, Wednesday night, to have a public meeting to try and reassure the public that these people actually know what they're doing. I think there's an interesting perception that this meeting might actually be a release of new information, but actually what I think it is probably more likely to be is grandstanding by the various public officials to try to look like they're remotely competent. In order to get a meeting with the city, I had to fight tooth and nail in order to get in. It was actually quite extraordinary, the obstacles that were put in my way. What I found particularly curious was members of the community that were resistive to me going and having this meeting, to actually have a frank conversation with these folk prior to the public meeting. I think there was a concern raised by a few that this may sully the waters of the public meeting and that these people may not attend the public meeting based on a series of questions that I had. Things like, why are these gang houses maintained? What kind of events actually trigger the Gang Prevention Task Force? As I learned in the meeting, the Gang Prevention Task Force really isn't what I thought it was going in. But more importantly, what things have been learnt through this process? Like, what could these institutions have done differently? And how, fundamentally, they could have improved the community through doing things in advance. None of these questions were really answered once I understood that the Gang Prevention Task Force was more associated with, like, telling kids to stay in school and get good jobs and this kind of stuff. I realized that my idea of a Gang Prevention Task Force was probably a distinctly different thing than the city's perspective. These were incredibly nice gentlemen. Of the people who I've met through the city, these are the nicest possible examples of humanity, and I don't necessarily want to satirize them in terms of their general interests and abilities, but they are not the hard-nosed people, they're not the crime fighters that really we need in this circumstance, and I don't think they had answers associated with how to mitigate the rise in shootings and general violence in our community. To that end, it was an experience, but it was part of a series of experiences that I'm labeling things to get me out of San Jose. Tom Barbalet in San Jose, signing out.